If a little green is good, more is even better. Now, back to Green is Good with John Shigarian and Mike Brady.
Welcome back to Green is Good, and we're so excited today to have Jeff Yeager with us. Jeff, as I said on the intro, he was called the ultimate cheapskate by Matt Lauer of the Today Show. And Jeff wrote a book last year called The Ultimate Cheapskate's Roadmap to True Riches. And you can see all of Jeff's great work on his website, ultimatecheapskate.com, or on his weekly blog, which shows up on thedailygreen.com. Jeff Yeager, welcome to Green is Good. Mike and I are so excited to have you here today.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on your show, but thanks most of all for calling me on your dime.
Oh, there you go.
As I always say, John, call me cheap, just never call me collect.
You're a man after my own heart. I've used that very phrase on my morning show with my partner, Rose Ortega. Jeff, I went on to your website, ultimatecheapskate.com, and I love at the very top, there's a quote from your wife. She must be just an amazing woman. The quote is, groceries don't count as Christmas gifts, even if you wrap them.
Oh, the poor thing.
Oh, man.
The other day, Jeff, can't we just go out to dinner at a movie once without having to stop at the blood bank? Oh, poor thing.
Hey, Jeff, tell our listeners about your book and, talk about, timing is everything. What a great book to come out last year, The Ultimate Cheapskate's Roadmap to True Riches, a practical and fun guide to enjoying life more by spending less. Last year being one of the worst years in economic history in the United States. Tell us about the success of your book, and then we're going to want to get into the various practical tips from your book. But how's it been? That was your first book, and how's it gone?
Yeah, it's my first book. I'm really proud of it, but I've been writing about this stuff for years, and the timing was purely coincidental. My book came out basically January 1st of 2008.
Okay.
3 days later, the U.S. economy imploded.
Wow.
No fault of the book. But the odd thing is, the publishing business, I had finished writing the book about a year and a half before that. Summer of 2006, I guess. And so it was, written as sort of a quaint little piece because I'm a quaint little guy, and now all of a sudden some of these issues are being taken seriously. And, I have a lot of fun with the word cheapskate, mostly at my own expense. I write a combination of humor and practical advice. And some serious stuff, too, that maybe we'll get into in a little bit. But to me, the definition of a cheapskate is really the polar opposite of a conspicuous consumer. Conspicuous consumers are folks who spend and consume at warp speed, really to show off. And cheapskates like me, we are frankly too self-confident and too smart to spend money on things that we don't want and probably don't even need, particularly when there's so many people in the world who are truly needy. So it's not, in my definition, it's not about being greedy, it's not about being dishonest, it's not about trying to amass a big bank account. It's really about trying to value the things that are very important in life that come without a price tag. So it's not really about the money.
Right.
It's about quality of life. As I often say, I think we've become a culture that's become more concerned with amassing a quantity of stuff than a quality of life. I think there's a big difference.
Well, you're right, and that's a great message, actually. And, you're right, Jeff. A couple of years ago, cheapskate did have a negative connotation, but I think we're evolving a little bit, and I think you're onto something really big because now, given the economy and given how people are struggling and are hunkering down and focusing more on what's important, you've almost become the vogue. You are almost, Mr. Popular now. So talk a little bit about why you're on the show today. How do you end up on thedailygreen.com, and how do you relate Green is Good and being a cheapskate? How do you tie those things together?
Well, to me, and I've been a proud environmentalist my whole life. I'm 52. I was a member of the Sierra Club way back in the early 70s before it was cool. But I've always seen there to be this inherent connection, particularly if you're a typical American, between consuming and therefore spending less and, if you will, living lighter on the planet. So to me, they're inseparable, even though, and I want to talk about this a little bit if you give me a minute. That's a message we don't hear so often. But before I start, John, just because I do consider myself an ardent environmentalist, but just the other day, a longtime friend of mine questioned my credentials both as an environmentalist and as a cheapskate when he found out that I used disposable razors.
Okay.
And what the heck do you expect? I hardly ever find the other kind in my neighbor's trash.
Oh, jeez.
Reduce, reuse.
Hey, so you've been doing this really your whole life. You've been
Yes,
you've been living this way. This is not something.
As I say, I blog on a website called The Daily Green, which is Hearst's big environmental website, and I blog as the Green Cheapskate, emphasizing this relationship between spending and consuming less and living lighter on the planet. You know, and I'm not carping on the current green movement. I think it's terrific that Americans are finally climbing on the big old green bus. It's become in vogue to be environmentally conscious. But as I often rant about on my blog, I think there's quite a bit of hypocrisy.
What do you mean by that?
Well, that really what's fueled the popularity of the environmental movement in America, arguably, is the very same thing that it ought to be trying to rail against. And I speak of wanton consumerism. With all due respect, I think the uber consumers that we are, the environmental movement has largely caught on in America because now it's cool to spend a lot of money on a lot of so-called green products.
Like, what do you mean by that? Tell us what you mean.
Everything from expensive hybrid cars to household cleaners that are green to green wines. For God's sake, the other day I saw somebody on a fashion model on the Today Show sporting a green dress that cost almost $1,000. It took my breath away. But then they said it was made out of hemp. So I'm thinking, well, I don't know. I mean, if I smoked it, it might be a good value. So and again, I'm not carping on it. I'm saying that it's possible to spend a lot of money to live green, but it's even more possible and practical to simply scale back on consumption, spend less, and live even greener. Let's take household cleaning products, green cleaning products soft on the environment, very expensive, usually about 30 to 50 to 100% more than their toxic equivalents. I clean, and have always cleaned, almost entirely with baking soda and vinegar.
Does that really get the job done, though?
All kinds of surfaces, all kinds of combinations, super cheap, and better for the environment than even the expensive green products. I'll give you another example. I have nothing against hybrid cars. I'm sure a Prius at $30,000 is great.
Right.
Better for the environment is to drive a gas guzzler and bring 4 of your friends with you to work.
Well, that's a great point.
Does make a lot of sense.
Best of all is to carpool in a Prius. You'll get no argument here.
Sure.
It's that American mindset that we think we're doing something great because we spent $30,000 on a Prius, but we're still driving to work by ourselves.
So you're just taking a very practical approach to the green revolution.
If you're a typical American, the greenest thing you can do is to spend and consume less. You know, we're big on, as American environmentalists, saving the rainforest. Not a bad cause, but we don't bat an eye about, say, remodeling a bathroom in our home that really doesn't need remodeling. The environmental sensitive thing is to not remodel that bathroom.
Huh. Okay, so I get what you're saying. In your book, though, you talk about the money step. The money step. I've never heard that. Explain what this whole money step means.
It's a phrase I coined really I spent 25 years managing national nonprofit organizations, including environmental organizations here in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And what occurred to me is that, and it's a generational thing, within the last few generations of America, the so-called money step has become the default setting. It's like a little dance. Everything we do in life now involves earning some money, to spend some money, to get what we want.
Right.
Or at least what we think we want, until we get it, and then it kind of disappoints us. So you know what we have to do, John?
What's that?
We need to earn some money to spend some money to get what we want. And my argument is that that's a fairly recent phenomenon in America. Our grandparents didn't always go through that money step. I mean, they made things last. They did without. They took joy in things that didn't always cost money or a lot of money. So I sort of argue against this notion that everything that we value has to involve money, and that, frankly, we need to spend all of our time here on Earth, which is a limited commodity, chasing after more money and more stuff that's bound to disappoint. Do you know, studies have shown that 80% of the discretionary items that Americans buy, they express regrets about having purchased within a year of having made the purchase.
Really?
That is amazing. You know, as I listen to you speak, Jeff, and I'm on your website and I'm looking at the cover of your book, The Ultimate Cheapskate's Roadmap to True Riches, you are reminding me of a book that really kind of set my life's course. I read it back in high school during American literature, and it was by Henry David Thoreau.
Sure, Walden.
Thank you very much. And you're putting me in mind of Henry David Thoreau in a 21st century setting, because what you say makes so much sense in the pursuit, doing the money step of trying to get more money to buy more things which we think is going to make us happier. We have less time to enjoy the true riches of life. As you say in the title of your book, The Roadmap to True Riches, which are those things that money can't buy. Time spent with family, with friends, with experiencing things.
Well, I'm very flattered by that comparison because I'm a big fan of Thoreau's, but I have to say the most flattering review my book received was from one reviewer who said, Yeager is like a cross between Henry David Thoreau and Jeff Foxworthy.
Well, that's
very cool. Very well put.
And I do try to bring some humor to it, largely at my expense and my poor wife's expense. But the bottom line is I'm trying to engage people in a very serious conversation. My editor referred to the style as sucker punching. 1 minute I'm telling you a fairly obscene joke in the book, and the next minute I'm telling you how we could solve the problem of world poverty for the equivalent of what Americans and Europeans spend on perfume and cologne every year. That's true.
But Jeff, that's your brilliance. You are a Rhodes Scholar nominee, but you were voted the funniest student in the 4th grade class. So you get to deliver a very important message, but in a very fun and enjoyable and consumable way.
I'm pretty sure if I had gone on to the 5th grade, I would have been the funniest student.
Rhodes Scholar nominee in 4th grade. You don't talk to a guy like you every day, Jeff.
No, this is really unique, Mike, to have Jeff on now. This is amazing. Hey, so why don't you tell there's another fantastic term from your book that, again, I've never seen ever in my 47 years on this planet. It's called fiscal fasting. I want you to explain what you mean by that to our listeners.
Yeah, it's become pretty. I coined the phrase, and it's become pretty popular since the book came out. Fiscal fasting, I describe it as spending detox. I challenge people to go for a week out of every year without spending any money. No credit cards, no cash. This is the week where we'll use up the food that we have on hand and probably realize how much we waste. In fact, to digress for a minute, do you know the USDA says that Americans throw away 25% of the food that we buy?
Wow.
That's a pound of food per person per day.
Wow.
Guys, that's like throwing away an Olsen twin every other month. I think it helps to put a face on the problem. I digress, but this is the week of the fiscal fast where we'll try to do something like actually carpool. We love to talk about that stuff. It makes perfect sense for the other guy to do, but not for me. This is the week where we'll make our own fun. Maybe play board games with the family or talk as a family. Rather than trotting off to a movie theater or arcade, it'll do 3 things, a fiscal fast. 1, you'll save some money during the week, and that's great.
That's great.
Time. So use it to pay down some debt, put it into savings, don't run out and spend it the next week.
Right.
The most important thing it does is it really shows you how you spend and probably waste money in a typical week. And third, the great thing is it reminds us all that there's so much terrific stuff in life that doesn't cost a dime.
Well, then really what you're saying then, Jeff, is you're giving a consciousness to everything we do, whether it's consuming, whether it's how we spend our money. You're bringing a whole consciousness to it, which I guess is your brilliance and your genius. Since you are a Rhodes Scholar nominee, but was also voted the funniest student in the 4th grade, that I guess that's what you do.
Yeah, and John, I'm also convinced if I had gone on to the 5th grade, I would have been the funniest student.
Well, thank gosh, we're lucky enough to have you on the show, and you're able to share some of these tidbits. Talk a little bit about. Hey, and by the way, your great book, The Ultimate Cheapskate's Roadmap. You people, if they don't want to waste paper, they could download it on their Kindle. Also, is that not correct?
Yeah, and I'm obligated by the oath I took of the Chapehood to say something that I always say in interviews, which is if you're interested in reading my book, don't buy it. It's largely available at public libraries. You already bought a copy of it with your tax dollars. Borrow it from a public library. I really try to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. If you do buy a copy of it, do us all a favor and pass it along to a friend or donate it to a library after you're through reading it.
Well, that shows truly how your DNA really is green and how good you are. I'm sure your publisher's not going to be smiling right now when they listen to this show.
My publisher cringes whenever I say that. In fact, he called the other day and he said, we have good news and bad about your book, Jeff. The good news is more than 1 million people have read it. So the bad news is they're all cheapskates. They borrow it from a library. We've only sold 27 copies.
Well, I know how funny you are, and I know that you deliver very important information in a very fun and consumable way. But I actually know that's not true, because this year, I want to tease a little bit. You do have a new book coming out. And you want to talk a little bit about what the title is?
I have a book. My second book is called The Cheapskate Next Door, The Surprising Secrets of Americans for Living Happily Below Their Means. And it's kind of in the tradition of the first one. It's funny. It's got kind of a travel log. I as I told you, John, I do something a little different with my book tours, being the ultimate cheapskate. I do what I call the tour to Cheapskate. I literally do my book tours by bicycle.
What?
You're serious?
Are you like the Ed Begley? You're like the Ed Begley of authors. You ride around.
I am, yeah. And I'm a big bicyclist, and I stay not at hotels, but I stay in the homes of fellow cheapskates who put me up, usually total strangers. And I'm absolutely serious about this. If anyone would like to host me, go to my website, ultimatecheapskate.com, and email me with the invitation. And we'll see if we can coordinate that. And, because a big part of what I'm about is charitability, I do this not to save money. What I did was I struck a deal with my publisher where they pay me the normal book tour per diem.
Wow.
Right.
But because I spend very little of that, traveling as I do, I take what I don't spend and I donate to local libraries along my route. So with my first book, I pedaled about 3,000 miles and donated just about $3,000 to libraries and nonprofit groups, and I'll be doing the same with the book that comes out in June.
Well, if your June tour is on the West Coast and you come up through the Central Valley, rather than email you, I'm going to extend an invitation to you right now, Jeff. My wife, Marina, and I would be honored to have you stay with us, and we would love to spend as much time talking to you. So that's
I'm going to take you up on that, and you'll be shocked, because, people think this doesn't actually happen. I will show up on your doorstep some evening, all 6'4", sweaty bicyclist cheapskate. You'll be drawing the curtains, Mike.
Well, that's okay.
Locking up the silver. The ultimate cheapskate at the door. No, I really appreciate that.
No.
Take you up, and I'm a very good house guest. I try to take, keep up after myself and clean up and so on.
Well, I do mean exactly what I say. And as far as the showers, I'm not worried at all. We've got a garden hose in the back, and we will use the gray water to water the plants. Okay,
I love it.
Hey, and we will honestly have you back in the studio. If you come to Fresno, we will host a book signing. Mike has generously offered to have you at his house with Marina, his beautiful wife. But we would also have a Green is Good book signing for you here and host that for you.
I have bicycled through Fresno before on a couple of occasions, so I look forward to getting back out there.
We would love that, but let's go back, and we're excited about your new book, and we're excited to host you, and thank you, Mike, for that offer. And any of our listeners who wanna host Jeff Yeager, please go to, as he said, to his website, ultimatecheapskate.com, and fill out the form and invite him to your house on his book tour. But we're down to the last couple minutes, and I want to leave our listeners with two other terms that you bring up in your book that I want you to explain as inspirational to them: contra economics and creative repurposing. You've got 2 minutes to explain that to our listeners. Go ahead, Jeff.
Contra economics is that my theory that the vast majority of the American economy consists of nonsensical spending transactions that cancel each other out. For instance, every year we spend $2 billion trying to promote hair growth with Rogaine and hair weaves.
Sure.
$2 billion trying to remove unwanted body hair. So I guess the good news is, as a nation, we agree we have the right amount of hair. The bad news is location. The creative repurposing is something I've been writing a lot about since my book came out, again, on the Green Cheapskate blog. Ways to reuse, get more than one life out of all kinds of things, everything from pantyhose to tinfoil to packing peanuts. Different ways that I've invented here in the Cheapskate Lab to use those things up. And, that really is a family tradition. I come from a long line of creative repurposers. In fact, my grandmother used to make all of our Christmas decorations out of things like the specimen cups from my grandfather's urological visit.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Oh, my gosh. Well, Jeff, I want all our listeners to really, as we discussed, either borrow your book, go out and buy your book, go buy your new book, or go to your website, ultimatecheapskate.com, get more great tips and read more of your blog. And also they can read you, and this is where I started reading you, on the dailygreen.com. Your weekly blog is amazing there. Jeff Yeager, we are so lucky and honored, and Mike and I have really enjoyed learning all the principles you've got. We want to host you when you come to Fresno. And Jeff Yeager, you are truly living proof that green is good.
Thanks, guys. Stay cheap.